Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. Well, today we're going to learn more about John Lennon, and we're going to get it through the eyes of his first wife, Cynthia. So Cynthia Lennon wrote a book about John, and she said she was tired of the people writing books who knew nothing about her or John, and they would say that she was only some girl who became pregnant and John decided to marry her. Cynthia stated it was far from the truth. She said, "I was at John's side throughout the most exciting, extraordinary, and eventful 10 years of his life. It was a time he was at his creative best, a time when he was witty, passionate, honest, and open, when he loved his family and loved the Beatles, a time before drugs and fame led him towards the destruction of so much that he had valued." So they first met at college. John was in Cynthia's lettering class, and this wasn't a class he was supposed to be in or wanted to be in, but he was ordered there because the other teachers refused to have him in their class. Cynthia at first wasn't interested in John. He wasn't her type. He had a teddy boy look, and she was used to clean-cut boys, and she was scared of his comments because she felt like he would say something sarcastic to her. And then he did start calling her Miss Prim or Miss Powell. And then later they started to find things in common. First their bad eyesight, and that was a start, and then John would walk around with a guitar on his back, and he told Cynthia he was in a group called the Quarrymen. And after school, John would play songs that were popular in the day, and Cynthia realized how much that he loved music. And he lost his cynical way, and his face was softer when he was playing his guitar. So Cynthia was halfway through the term at school when she felt like she was falling in love with John. And one day after class, when everyone had gone and she was packing up her things, John started to sing Ain't She Sweet. So Cynthia left embarrassed before the song's end, and then she started to wonder if he felt the same way about her. So they got together after going to a pub with friends. After having drinks with friends, John asked Cynthia to leave with him. It was then that they had a long, passionate kiss outside on the street, and he told her his friend Stuart had a place they could go to, and she said at that moment she would have gone anywhere with him. So Stuart's place wasn't that great, but it didn't matter to them. She said it was special for her more than a previous experience she had had. And then later, Cynthia realized that she needed to go home. And he said to her, "What are you doing tomorrow and the next day and the next?" So they started spending all their time together. John and Cynthia didn't have much money, but that didn't matter. They had money, and when they had money, they would go to the movies. And they sat in double seats in the back and kissed and cuddled. They didn't really care about the movie, and they would stay for a couple of showings. Then they would walk and talk and stretch his drink out in the coffee shop or the pub. Cynthia said that she was his first serious relationship. John had been with other girls, but it hadn't lasted long. And she went along with what John wanted to do, and she said they laughed a lot, and along with the good times, there were some not-so-good times. He would insist that Cynthia stay with him until the last train left, and then that would get her home after midnight, which didn't, sit too well with Cynthia. I guess, going out in the middle of the night wouldn't be something I would want to do either. And she was worried about her mom being alone since the father had died not that long ago, and the mother needed her. And then she also had to get her homework done, but John didn't care, and he would get angry with her. And she was afraid of his temper. If he didn't get his way, he would verbally abuse her until she gave in. And once she did give in, he would be his loving self again. And John was jealous of Cynthia's friendship with a girl named Phil, and he was also jealous of her work when she had to be there instead of being with him. Cynthia felt like he was a lost soul, and so she wanted to give him understanding and security. And he would get upset if he thought some other guy might be interested in her, even though she said she never would have been unfaithful to him. Well, John was a romantic. He wrote love poems on scraps of paper and passed them to her in class. And their first Christmas together, he drew a Christmas card for her. And Cynthia was happy that they were together, though there were times he would turn on her when he was jealous and bring her to tears, and he was mad at her. He would dare her to leave him. So it sounds like he was insecure, and it was probably stemmed from his childhood when his father was absent with his job at sea, and his mom let her sister raise him. So a different side of John. After a time, it was agreed that John and his Aunt Mimi and Cynthia and her mom would get together and meet. It started out polite, but then Mimi said that Cynthia was distracting John from his studies, and Cynthia's mom took up for her daughter, so it all led to an argument. Mimi said that Cynthia was wrong for John and gave her reasons, And Cynthia's mom told Mimi that John was lucky to find a girl like her. So Cynthia and John were in shock, and John got up and left the house, and Cynthia ran after him and found him in tears. She got him to go back, and in the meantime, the two ladies had called a truce while they had been gone. And even though John could be combative, he didn't like conflict or confrontation. So when it happened, he looked for an escape hatch. Cynthia said that John was usually only confrontational when he'd been drinking. So after the meeting of Cynthia's mom and Aunt Mimi, they decided it was best to see them separately. Cynthia got along pretty good with Aunt Mimi, and John was friendly with Cynthia's mom. So this next part is really interesting. It's when Cynthia first met Paul and George. So I don't want to go too much into the Beatles themselves. This story is more of how Cynthia and John were in their relationship. But she came up with some interesting observations about the early Beatle days. Cynthia said at the time she met Paul and George, she was 19, John was 18, Paul was 17, and George 16. And she would go join them and watch them make music. And they would teach each other new chords, work out tunes to popular songs, and then they started to put together their own. So Paul was the first one to write a song, and John started writing songs soon after. And George was there to tag along. Cynthia said he would defer to John and Paul, even though he was a fantastic guitar player. Cynthia said that John and Paul tolerated him because of how good he was on the guitar, but they ignored him when they were working on something together. Cynthia said that George's strength was his tenacity. He would spend hours working out a chord sequence or practicing a song until it was perfect. So Paul seemed to be the driving force in the band. Cynthia said that John wanted the group to do well, but he was easily distracted and would go from one thing to the next with projects. He needed Paul's drive and determination to keep him focused on the pursuit of success. And then Paul needed John's no rules and his lateral thinking. Paul tried to impress John because he was the leader of the band, and Paul was impressed by John's laid-back and in-charge attitude. And John recognized Paul's talent and thought he could learn from him. I'll stop at this section of the book, and the last thing I saw that was interesting was that Paul and Cynthia and John's friend Stuart always saw something special in John. Most people thought that he wouldn't amount to much because he was always trying to be the clown in school. Teachers thought he would either be a genius or a tramp, with no in between. So it's interesting to learn more about John's past and see what kind of person he was through the eyes of his friends, and in this case, his girlfriend and future wife. So we found out that Cynthia wasn't just a girl he got pregnant, but someone he loved and was possessive of. And this is the John who was just beginning to go forward in his dream. And we see that even at his young age, music was the only career he had on his mind. Next, we'll see how things were with John once he married Cynthia, and how all the success in the band had an effect on their marriage. So I hope everybody enjoyed the video. And if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, that would be appreciated. And I hope everybody's been having a good day. And don't forget to click on the notification bell, and you'll be notified whenever a new video comes up. So tune in again soon for another episode of The Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.